So, believe it or not, people don't like living under a dictator who takes away your rights, doesn't let you own any property, and tells you what exactly to do with your day. And by the 1980s, it became clear that people in the Soviet Union were unhappy with their lives and it was starting to collapse. And today we're going to talk about the undoing of the Soviet Union. So, to talk about that, we need to talk about these two. On the left in the brown suit, you see the United States president as of 1980. That's Ronald Reagan. Now, Ronald Reagan was an actor in the 50s, very popular. He did a movie with a chimpanzee, if you could believe that. He's going to go on to become governor of California, serves there for 8 years, and then becomes president of the United States. He's extremely popular, and he gets elected on a wave of anti Soviet Union sentiment. He promises to build up the American military to make it strong, to intimidate the Soviet Union into the ground. He also wants to actually talk to the Soviet Union to see if they'll ease up on any of their policies. And Ronald Reagan gets a lot of credit for putting the end of the Cold War in motion. But the guy who actually really ended the Soviet Union was the leader of the Soviet Union itself, the guy with the gray suit. This is Mikhail Gorbachev. And he's going to institute policies that's going to bring the Soviet Union down. And he's going to win the Nobel Peace Prize for what he does. So some of these conflicts were of Gorbachev's doing, and others were just naturally happening. All right. So I mentioned the United States was putting pressure on the Soviet Union by increasing military expenses. We were building up our military, challenging the Soviet Union to build up theirs. The Soviet Union couldn't keep up. See, what little money they had, they were putting toward building a better military and not taking care of their people. So there were mass famines actually going on in the Soviet Union. There was rising nationalism in Soviet republics. Remember, it started off as just Russia, but after World War II, Russia was sweeping in, conquering territories that were left leaderless by the war and setting up shop. And now all those people in those countries are starting to want their country back. Also, communism, it sounds nice that everyone's getting their job and they're making sure they're being taken care of. Communism just doesn't allow for good economy. All right. So if people are doing the same thing day in, day out, day in, day out, day in, day out, there's no innovation. And that's what an economy thrives on. So any new ideas were kind of being stifled in favor of doing the same old thing. Now, Gorbachev's big ideas that are going to kind of lead to the end of the Soviet Union are called glasnost and perestroika. Or openness and economic restructuring. Remember, communism is a political and economic system. So, glasnost is going to lead to people getting more say in government. All right. And with glasnost, the next time the Soviet Union had an election, there was actually more than one party allowed to be on the ballot. Instead of just the Communist Party, there were other parties as well. And also under economic restructuring or perestroika, Soviet Union became more tolerant of foreign investment. They had been a closed-off country forever. Also, workers, for the first time in 50 years, could bargain for their rights and form unions and things. And also, like, new companies were allowed to innovate. And that's really what's going to bump up the Soviet Union. Now, glasnost and perestroika aren't going to fix the Soviet Union overnight. There's going to be a rough few years, but eventually the Soviet Union is going to revert back to being Russia. All the countries they had conquered are going to get their independence, and Soviet communism isn't going to be around anymore. So just to illustrate the military spending going on, so this red line is how much America was spending on the military. So this is right before World War II. spikes tremendously during World War II, and then we kind of go down. Now, by 1950s, we're getting into the Korean War, so we bumped up. But notice how the blue line of the Soviet Union never goes above the red line of the United States. So try as they might, the Soviet Union could spend all the money in the world, but they were not going to keep up with the United States and having the best army. Now, the country you see in red, that is Russia before it became the Soviet Union. And then they had absorbed all these little kind of leaderless country, all these leaderless states after World War II. Now, by the 1980s, these people are getting fed up with being controlled by the communist system. So they start pushing for their own independence. And it's not just one country, just about all these countries at the same time were trying to get their independence from the Soviet Union. They were like, I want to be Polish. I want to be Estonian. I want to be Armenian. I don't want to be a Soviet. It'd be like if all the tribes of the United States had just up and kicked out the conquistadors when the conquistadors were colonizing North America. And it's weird to think about, but one of the things that's going to signal the true end of the Soviet Union is McDonald's. Now, 1990, Moscow, the capital of Russia, is going to get its first McDonald's, and people are going to lose their ever loving minds because after 50 years in an oppressive system, nothing new had really come about. And McDonald's is going to be seen as the hallmark of capitalism. And everyone had been hearing for years how great McDonald's hamburgers were, and they wanted one. Now, what you're not seeing in this picture is the line of thousands of people stretching well over a mile just to get into this restaurant. This McDonald's in Moscow was bigger than the Avengers movies. It was the true end of the Soviet Union once we started instituting capitalism in the country.